Hello and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden podcast. Though I will say that this is not necessarily just another episode of the podcast. This is a very special episode indeed, and I'll talk more about that very soon. Firstly, I just wanted to mention that some of you may know that every year my wife and I take a 3 to 4 week work trip in November, helping out with my parents' company, installing Christmas decorations of all things. So I'm recording this episode from a motel room in a quiet little beach town somewhere between Townsville and Ingham in northern Queensland. It's hot, it's humid, and we've just had a very long day of work, a very rewarding day. But the reason I'm recording this special episode from this motel room in northern Queensland is because this work trip coincides, funnily enough, with the day when my very first book has been published and is available for pre-order. And so I wanted to speak to all of you, just myself to you. Not a very long episode, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a breakdown of what is the book, what's it about perhaps, what might you get from it, how did it come about, and maybe to thank a few people along the way. And so I guess I want to start by saying thank you so much to all of you who have over the years supported me and who have over the years encouraged me to bring out the very best of myself, so that together we can learn and grow and share, and so that we can all hopefully become stronger and better together. It's one of the miracles, really, of these modern forms of communication is that they make it possible for us to reach out to people who are walking similar paths to our own, and in doing so, we get to, as I said, strengthen each other. And so to all of you who have listened to me over the years, or who have encouraged me, who have undergone coaching with me, who have any form of communication with me, showing your support for this path that I'm walking, thank you. You've done a lot more for me than what you might ever know, and so I appreciate your attention and your careful listening, and most importantly, I appreciate you taking the things that I've always strived to communicate and using them in your life so that you can experience the transformation that comes from philosophy. So thank you. And with that said, this new book, it's called The Poet and the Sage, and it represents for me a really vital next step along this path that I've been walking with you for these past few years. And that vital step, it's really for me to push beyond the bounds of my thinking, beyond the bounds of my own understanding, my own perceptions, to, mythologically speaking, to walk beyond the boundaries of the village, the walled garden, and to hopefully bring something back to the community, something of value, something that is useful, something that you can take and that you can use in your life to become better, stronger, wiser, to walk a better path in life. That should be the goal of any thinker. It should be the goal of any leader, any person who is striving to communicate to a community, should be to give them something that makes them stronger, better, wiser people. And over the past few years, there have been many opportunities for me to say, okay, well, maybe I should write a book about Stoicism, or maybe I should write a personal development book. There were many opportunities for me to pause and reflect on what I had learned and offer you something of that sort. But the timing never felt right. The timing and the message never felt on point. Seneca, lately in my episodes on Seneca's writings, I've been diving into some of his writings where he describes how, if you're going to share a message with somebody, you have to be like an archer. You have to hit the target. You have to use the right words. You have to communicate in the right way, at the right time, to the right person, from the right place. It's about virtue in your communication, right? And so you've got to hit the target. And the time was never right for me to write a book like that. And last year when I started writing The Poet and the Sage, the time was just right. Because I knew how to listen to that feeling of when something is just right. And the reason I was prepped to know that the timing for this book was just right and that the message was on point and that it was coming through onto the paper in the right way was because for the few months before starting writing this book, I was really starting to understand the depth of that idea that the Stoics bring to us, which is that perhaps one of the ultimate aims, or perhaps the ultimate aim in life, is to be living in agreement with nature. Part of that idea is virtue in how you contribute to the world, as in, you have a unique personality, you have unique talents, unique gifts. Your job is to figure those out. Your job is to figure out what is your nature, and as a part of your nature, how do you contribute in the best way? And I was really trying to focus on getting that right. And what I have learned is that when you get that right, then things start to fall in place with what you create, with what you offer to the world, right? And so, as I mentioned earlier, I always thought that I was going to write a book about Stoicism, or a personal development book or something like that. Now, when I started writing The Poet and the Sage, what started coming out, because I was so focused not on what I thought I wanted to write, but what I was focused on writing what I would write, the I that I hoped would come forth if I decided to get out of the way, right, and allow my nature to come out, right? So what I started to write was actually poetry and prose. And let me tell you something, when I was growing up, I never read poetry, and I never wanted to. I never cared about it. Even though my father is a beautiful poet, he writes poems for every member of the family. He writes poems about the places that he goes. He's an absolute wordsmith, beautiful writer. I never paid that much attention until I started writing The Poet and the Sage, and I started to realize that, wow, my dad is, coming out through me, into the form that I write in, the way that I write, because I'm continuing that tradition which has obviously been passed on through me, and so it's, writing this book in many ways changed my relationship with my parents, and particularly with my dad, because it just showed me how connected I am to him and his own nature. And so one of the main reasons why I'm so excited to offer this, my first published book, to all of you, is that while writing this book, I myself was transformed. And that's what's so exciting for me as well, just personally, is that I'm starting to finally tap into these modes of communication, whether it is through my writings, my poetry, or through my music, these forms of communications that align perfectly with my own nature. And so the great thing about this book is that you will be getting a deep dive into the contents of my soul as I underwent a personal transformation. And so this book is a personal development book, but more than that, it's a personal transformation book. It's a work of theology. It's a work of philosophy. It's a work of deep mythology and symbolism. You will find threads of Stoicism. You will find threads of Taoism. You will find Marcus Aurelius in there, and Seneca and Heraclitus. You will find the kind of unconscious bubblings up from the depths of my soul coming from my Christian upbringing. So you will find Christian theology and symbolism in there that naturally flowed out in the writing process. And to explain this a little bit further, I want to tell you the story about how I started to write The Poet and the Sage. Because it wasn't a matter of me saying, I'm going to write a book and it's going to be called The Poet and the Sage. No, what actually happened was I was kind of journaling one day and I began to write this kind of waking dream that I was having. And it was the first truly artistic experience that I've had. You know, an artistic experience is one where you sort of get out of the way of yourself and allow the art to happen, allow the writing to happen, or the poetry or the music, allow it to flow out of you onto the page. And so that's what started to happen with this waking dream. And when you read the book, you will find this waking dream. I believe it's chapter 3 or 4. You'll find out. It's called The Dream. And when I wrote this dream, I thought, man, this is weird. I couldn't just think about this and come up with this. This is strange. So I took this piece of writing to Sharon LaBelle, and I said, Sharon, what do you think of this? This is a little bit strange, right? And she read it and she said, you have to keep on writing. And she just really encouraged me to continue with this book and to allow it to write itself, just to happen. And for that, I will be eternally grateful for Sharon. You know, this book would not have been written without her careful guidance. And Sharon has a real knack for being aware of when she's seeing a creative process taking place and encouraging it to come out in the right kind of way. She's a true artist herself. And so she really has been a massive mentor to me throughout this whole process. And so it's one of the main reasons why our friendship has flourished into a beautiful one, and now one where we are working together in the Walled Garden, and I'm honored that is taking place. And so she is really somebody who I owe a massive debt of gratitude to. And so I want to thank Sharon as well. And we are actually going to be recording an episode, Sharon and I, about The Poet and the Sage. So you can look forward to that coming up soon. We're going to have a conversation. I think we'll actually invite people to come along to that as well and ask questions. Perhaps that will be the official book launch. But thank you, Sharon, because that's the story of how The Poet and the Sage began, was with that waking dream and Sharon saying, please continue this, just allow it to happen. And so thanks to Sharon's caretaking and her sage advice to me in those moments, really what I learned writing The Poet and the Sage was that when it comes to the way that I want to communicate to the world, I am always going to be the artist first, right? And through the art that I create, whether it is through poetry or whether it is through my music or any other writings and things like that, the message will come through if the process through which I am creating that message or sharing that message is hitting the target artistically. And so going back to a previous point that I made, that's how I know that this book is hitting the target in many ways for the way that I want to create and the kind of messages that I want to share. Because through my art, whether it is, as I said, through my poetry or music, I want to get you to see something different, to experience something different in life, to feel something different, to hear something different. I want to help you to have a transformative experience. And there's this great quote that I've been thinking about a lot lately from Stephen Jenkinson. So he said about the artistic process, art is a public service, and in that sense, it's culture work too. If you're expressing yourself through your art, then the chances are that you're getting in the way of that culture work, unless you happen to live a life wherein your personal dilemmas line up beautifully with the dilemmas of your culture. So I think that that's such a beautiful kind of definition of what art is. It's a cultural service. It's not self-expression. And so when I read that quote from him, when I heard him say that, I thought, man, that's how I really felt as I was creating The Poet and the Sage. And on top of that, I feel as though my own personal dilemmas are lining up perfectly with many of the dilemmas that we see in our culture today. To those of you who have been listening to me for a long time, you'll know that I've made it no secret that I feel as though we are in much need of wisdom in our culture today. We are in much need of deeper meaning in our lives. We are in much need of searching out the true meanings of these words, such as virtue, figuring out what is sacred, what is holy, what is worthwhile, what is going to be meaningful in life. And the whole reason why I even started this podcast in the first place, back when it was The Practical Stoic, was because I felt that I was in need of deeper wisdom in life. I was in need of deeper meaning in life. I needed to figure out what is virtue. I needed to figure out what is sacred, what is worthwhile in life. And so The Poet and the Sage is my cultural offering, my cultural service, with me trying to honestly ask the question, what is wisdom? Where might it be found? What is virtue? Where might it be found? What would it mean to live in agreement with nature? What does it mean to wrestle with God? What does it mean what would be meaningful in life? What is alignment? Where might that be found? All of these questions I'm trying to ask, even though at the time I might not have necessarily been thinking, I'm going to try and answer this question. But I was, working through these and many more questions, I guess, while I was putting this book together. So anyway, I don't want to take up too much more time here, other than to share with you the two main ways that you can read The Poet and the Sage at the moment. So the first and most important way that you can read The Poet and the Sage is by purchasing the hardcover version, which we have published and released for pre-sale and should be getting to the warehouse in a week or two, hopefully. And that is available on thewalledgarden.store, or if you go to thewalledgarden.com and follow the links there, and I will provide links in the notes for this episode. And the reason why I think that the hardcover is the most important format that you can read this book in is because I designed the entire book and did the illustrations and the artwork and all this sort of stuff with the thought in mind that when I read a book, I like it to be high quality. I like it to feel solid. I like it to be aesthetically pleasing. I like the book to inspire me, not just the contents inside, but the design of the book. I want it to all fit together into one beautiful piece of art, and so it's not just about what's in the book, it's also about how the book looks and feels. And so I really wanted it to be designed like that. And so I really have to thank my publisher, Peter, because what he did for me was he really allowed me to have that artistic input. And that meant that we actually spent more on the publication of The Poet and the Sage than what we might have needed to. But the reason we spent more creating it was because we wanted it to inspire the reader, not just what's in the book, but the way that the book looks and feels. And so there's actually, as I said, there's my own artwork in the book, there is my own illustrations. There is also poetry in the hardcover book that you will not get in any other format. And so I wanted it to be a really special format. This first book of mine, I wanted it to be designed perfectly. So thank you so much to Peter, not only for publishing the book, but for having faith in my own artistic vision for the book, making sure that the whole thing fits together in one beautiful artwork. So as I said, you can get that at thewalledgarden.store or thewalledgarden.com. Follow the links, and I will place those links in the notes below. Now, the second way that you can read this book is by becoming a member at thewalledgarden.com. So it's actually a different way of reading the book, but I think it's got equal strengths, because what I've done on the website is you can actually read The Poet and the Sage in web pages, and I've set it out really beautifully with my photography as well. Photography of the hills where I grew up. And that all actually fits in and ties into The Poet and the Sage and the symbolism within, the mythology within. And so you will be getting the images and the text as well. As I said, I really want people to read this in the hardcover because of the kind of totality of the artwork that I created. But nonetheless, if you become a member of The Walled Garden at thewalledgarden.com, you can read the entire book there as well. And I should mention, if you are going to become a member of The Walled Garden, make sure that you use the promo code Practical Stoic, all one word in uppercase. That's going to get you over 20% off if you become a caretaker member there. And that's for our first 100 members there as well. And so the final thing that I wanted to mention is that starting from December, I am going to be recording the audiobook for The Poet and the Sage. And that's going to be really stunning. That's only going to be available at the start, at least, to members of The Walled Garden. I'm going to be recording it by the side of a fire. Because I think The Poet and the Sage is the kind of book that you want it to, if you're going to read it, you might as well read it in the forest by a fire. It's that kind of book. And so the audiobook is going to have beautiful nature sounds, and I'm going to incorporate my music as well. And so I'm really excited to start putting that together in December. And just a note to all of you that will be available on thewalledgarden.com to members there. And I do hope to release a sample of that audiobook in the coming weeks, along with that conversation that I'm going to have with Sharon LaBelle about the book. And look, before I finish up, I forgot this, but I should probably mention to you all that the first 100 copies of the book, which are sold, the hardcover version being sold, will be signed copies as well. So if you're looking to get a signed copy, that is something to note. And so with that said, I want to thank you for listening, and I would be honored if you would consider purchasing The Poet and the Sage, and I really hope that it is transformative for you as you sit with this book and allow it to work its magic. Thank you. You've been listening to the Walled Garden podcast. For more episodes just like these, or to join our community, go to thewalledgarden.com. See you there.